And hello and welcome to Forum 360. It's a program with a global outlook and a local view from Western Reserve PBS, the Fusion Channel, and Rubber City radio stations, and we're heard here in Northeast Ohio. We're doing topics that we feel might bring the area up to date on some crucial issues, decision making, and today we're fortunate to talk about baby boomers and decision making, both legal and financial. There are 75 million baby boomers according to U.S. News and World Report, Time Magazine, Money Magazine, Bloomberg, and it is so important that the folks that were born between 1946 and 1964 that are now moving into retirement, they're moving into a change of lifestyle. And for many years, they ran the United States economy. They ran Northeast Ohio's many of the businesses and institutions, hospitals, and now they are starting to change their lifestyle. So we're fortunate to have two interesting guests that work with not only the baby boomers, but their families, the millennials, the Gen Xers, the sons and the daughters and the grandchildren of our baby boomers here. We have Chris Wetherbee. He is an attorney with Oberholtzer Filous in Medina County. Chris, good to have you with us.
Thanks for having me today, Bill.
And Jim Snyder, Senior Financial Group founder, talk show host on WHBC in Stark County, and adjunct faculty for Hondros College of Business of Westerville and the various campus locations around the state. He teaches business and topics such as financial planning. So I'm going to start with, what are some of the most important things that, if you have a client, my generation, Jim's generation, Chris, the baby boomers, what are some of the 1, 2, or 3 top concerns that they would have when they come to an attorney?
Really, some of the top concerns they have is, how do I ensure my legacy? How do I make sure that all of this work that I've done over the last 60, 70, 80 years continues after I pass? How do I make sure that what I want to have happen with the things that I've accumulated, the wealth, the assets that I have, how do I make sure that those get to either my children, my grandchildren, charities that are important to me, things like that. So that's probably the most important aspect. Secondary to that, how do I make sure that I protect my assets? As during my twilight years, in the event something were to happen to me, I ended up with long-term care as a common concern. How do I make sure that those assets are protected? And also, how do I make sure that my spouse is taken care of? Because often, one of the spouses either worked and the other stayed home, or one made significantly more, or the financial assets are titled primarily in one name. And how do you make sure that if that spouse passes away first, that everything is seamlessly available to the surviving spouse?
And Jim Snyder, what are some of the financial issues? Chris talked about trying to maintain the legacy, maintain the wealth that you've accumulated. What are some of the financial issues that you encounter with your clients?
So many of the clients that are baby boomers are retiring with 401k plans, and they're worried about how to turn that money on for income. That's a hot topic that you see all over the news, everywhere, every show on TV and that sort of thing. They're worried about how they're going to draw on their Social Security and what the pros and cons are of the choosing options there. And like the same with Chris, they're worried about making sure that the assets are going to transpond on down to their family. They're going to transfer, and they're going to, have everything titled correctly. The problem that we run into a lot in the financial side is we end up referring a lot of individuals to the law practice and attorneys because there are things that they need to get in order that they've just put off. And so sometimes, and it can go either way, but sometimes we're the first line of conversation because maybe they're having a conversation about their 401k rollover, and then we eventually get them to say, hey, it's time to get these legal documents updated as well. And all of the concerns that Chris expressed would be the same, the long-term care and all that sort of thing.
Now you see a change because in Northeast Ohio especially, we had the steel industry, the auto industry, and many of the cities like Cleveland, Akron, Canton, Massillon, Youngstown, Warren, they've got that type of industry that is now changing. Those pension plans that were very active, union representation and so forth, it's starting to wane. Businesses are changing, the global economy is taking over, and so once again we're talking a global outlook. It's changing. So how is that affecting the pensions now moderating or changing to the extent that baby boomers are going to have to worry a little bit?
So the old Rust Belt days that they used to call us are kind of gone,
right.
And all the industry is changing. We're more of a service industry globally,
right.
And a lot of those individuals have different pension plans from different companies. The idea that you would go to work, when I graduated from high school, you would go to work and work for one company and you retire from that company, are pretty much gone.
Right.
And we'd love it to be the case, it's just not. And so these individuals are changing jobs and they're constantly leaving things lay around that they have to follow through and get either rolled over, at least from the financial side, and they're leaving things unchanged because they're too busy trying to find jobs and move on to the next event. But clearly less than 17% of all industries nationwide have what they call a defined benefit plan, where you'd work for a certain company and then you knew what your benefit was. Those are all gone. So those have been replaced now with defined contribution plans, and that's the major change, at least from the financial side.
Now, Chris, if you are let's say a Gen Xer, a grandchild of a baby boomer, or a millennial, a son or daughter of a baby boomer, what are some things that you think the family members need to advise their baby boomer grandparents and parents right now? Well, legally, that is.
And it's always a difficult conversation, especially when you kind of have to sit around the kitchen table and have a discussion with mom, dad, grandma, grandpa about, okay, this isn't something we've ever talked about, but I need to know your assets generally, where they are, what you have in place. And probably the couple of things that are the most important to have in place are a durable power of attorney, which is, it allows the individual, the baby boomer, to designate someone that can take over finances or to assist with finances in the event that needs to happen.
Right.
And that can run the spectrum, anything from just run to the bank and move accounts around, or helping to deal with a financial professional to retitle the 401k assets and just update everything to help mom, dad, grandma, grandpa out.
We always hear about avoiding probate court, common pleas probate divisions around the state. Is that still one of the major concerns for an attorney handling estate planning?
Well, it is and it isn't. It's a case-by-case decision, and it's always important to meet with a legal professional before making any of these decisions. There are a number of free lunch seminars that one can go to, and the old adage that there's no such thing as a free lunch is unfortunately accurate. Right. But some of my clients, a trust absolutely makes sense.
The trusts, okay. And the local bar associations, the county bar associations here in Northeast Ohio can probably assist someone because we have audience from around Northeast Ohio, different cities. You're in Medina. For instance, for people your way, Oberholtzer Filous, medinalaw.com.
Yes, ma'am.
Would immediately could check your website, and Chris Weatherbee's active in that website. For Jim Snyder, is seniorfinancialgroup.com, seniorfinancialgroup.com. And Jim, also, I can think of when I was planning some investments, Roth IRA. The federal government came up, Congress came up with the Roth IRA. For instance, identify that, because I've just wondered, what did that do to assist the baby boomers in their, because a lot of that happened during the time of the baby boomers.
So the idea behind the Roth is that you always had a pension plan where you put money in before tax, but then that money grew tax deferred, and you had this big pot of money that now you have to pay tax on.
Okay.
Which the theory was that you'd be in a lower tax bracket and that sort of thing. So the government instituted the Roth and said, which would you rather do? Would you rather pay tax on the seed, or would you rather pay tax on the crop? That's the old analogy that they use. Now we've got all this money that has grown tax deferred, but now you don't have to pay tax on it. You didn't get a tax break putting the money in, but now you get tax-free coming out. And that's just the difference between the IRA and your pension plan. Okay. That's the major difference.
Now there's a couple key dates that baby boomers have to, age-wise, 59 and a half for their IRAs, and then 70 and
70 and a half.
70.5. So explain what how that will affect them if they take money out prematurely, the penalties, and if once they turn 70.5, baby boomers are living longer, they have to start taking out their money.
Right. So at 59.5, the government requires you, if you're in an IRA or a pension plan, all qualified money, including 403Bs and that sort of thing, to give you the permission to start withdrawing money without an additional 10% government penalty at 59.5.
Okay.
At 70.5, you must start making a withdrawal. First year withdrawal is only 3.7%, but a lot of people miss it. Now, even though most financial companies remind them in writing, they sometimes don't get it done. So we always encourage people, you know, to pay attention when you become 70.5, to start putting your financial plans together. And again, back to, that's also a great time to say, I need to have the talk with the kids, I need to start working on legal documents and make sure they're up to date, because we're working on the other half of life, so to speak, now. Right. But at 70.5, you've got to make withdrawals. If you don't do it, you're substantially penalized.
And the federal government is changing tax laws consistently. I mean, every few years, new Congress comes in every few years, and they change some of it. Right. The IRS very active in trying to, you know, get everybody to file properly, and it's good to see your accountant or your attorney to make sure those things happen. What are some of the tax liability legal issues that you see for clients in the baby boomers?
Well, at least this week, I always tell clients it's difficult to predict from an estate tax standpoint where we're going to be in 5, 10, 20 years. Right now, the estate tax doesn't functionally kick in until about $22 million for a couple. So for the vast majority of Northeast Ohioans, it's a non-issue. Right. That said, if we look historically, during the Bush tax cuts, the first decade of this millennia, the estate tax threshold moved every year, which absolutely drove estate planners nuts because, all right, I'm trying to plan for a moving threshold, which isn't helpful. Then it went away for a year, and then it came back at $1.5 million. So this week, the estate tax isn't something that the vast majority of Northeast Ohioans need to worry about. Ohio has done away with their estate tax. It is important, as a lot of my clients retire, they do move out of state somewhere a little warmer than Northeast Ohio winters. Understandable, but it does raise some potential complications because there are other states with estate taxes.
I am with Chris Wetherbee and Jim Snyder. Chris Wetherbee, attorney at law, graduate of the University of Akron, is with the law firm in Medina, Oberholtzer Filous. MedinaLaw.com is Chris's website. We also have Jim Snyder, a financial planner. It's worked decades with the Senior Financial Group that he founded in Stark County, and we are discussing baby boomers decision making here on Forum 360, a program, a global outlook with a local view on Western Reserve Public Television, Fusion Channel, and Rubber City Radio. I'm your host, Bill Steven Saus. And we looked at Time Magazine, we looked at U.S. News, Wall Street Journal, and we constantly are looking at the financial pages, and we look at the stock market. But Jim, should the baby boomers really worry about day-to-day changes, flux, or should they just? I think you would probably tell clients, let it ride for a while. Don't worry about the ups and downs so much. Is that what you would tell a client?
Well, certainly having any kind of financial plan put in place means stick to the plan. And the biggest problem that people have, or the biggest detriment to them, every year there's a study done by Dalbar. Dalbar does this study and says that the market returns X number of percent, but clients get half of that typically. And the reason they do is because toll-free numbers, internet, they can go in and move money in and out whenever they want. Right. That creates a problem because they don't stick to their plan. They see the news, and of course, just what you said, they shouldn't be doing that. Stick to whatever plan you design. Yeah, those plans change, but they change gradually. They change when impact events happen. You get married, you have children, you buy a house, you retire. Those are the times to make changes to your plan. Other than that, obviously, stick to saving money when you're younger and preserving and protecting that money when you're older. The biggest problem I see down the road is that young people aren't saving enough. The average 401k savings plan is about 5%. They need to be saving 20%, substantially different. The biggest problem I see with the older generation is some of them are still taking too much risk and they think it's never going to happen again.
Right, so be aware that things could go south, as they say, could go drastically down. We'll talk about as you talked about survivorship and wills and trusts, how important it is. And we're seeing, unfortunately, a lot of blended families. We see widows and widowers remarrying, or people having, unfortunately, divorce, and creates blended families. How does that affect the baby boomers right now trying to come to their attorney and say, this is the time we have to realign our will, our trusts, and so forth?
Yeah, and that's something that we're seeing more and more frequently, is when people, especially with adult children, remarry, and everybody, while both parents are alive, everybody's on the same page, everybody's moving the same direction. But it's very important that you not only sit down and have that conversation either with your parents or with the kids of, look, we love each other, we're building a life together, here's what we want to have happen after one of us passes. And to meet with an attorney to either set up a trust to supervise that process so that you can maintain, okay, this pot of money I'd like to go to my kids, this pot of money is going to go to your kids, and this pot of money is going to go to our church or this other cause that's important to us after the second of us passes. Because without that in place, I always say nobody does their best thinking right after that kind of traumatic event, after either a parent has passed or a step-parent has passed. So having that in place, make sure that there's a plan, that everybody has talked about the plan, and that everybody can execute the plan. Nothing positive is accomplished by litigating all of this, by having both sides of the family at each other, and then you're in court for years, and it can be very traumatic, both financially and emotionally.
So, as you said earlier in the program, preserving the assets and preserving the assets,
right,
and kind of controlling the liabilities is important. And Jim, let's talk about some of the vehicles that baby boomers now can use, like annuities, money market, some of the things that you would advise baby boomers over the years, since you've been active and you are a baby boomer. So what are some of the recommendations generally? Obviously, you're going to have to talk to your own financial planner, your own certified public accountant or attorney, but what are some of the things you're seeing more and more of for baby boomer investments?
Well, the biggest difference in conversation probably now compared to years ago is that you're having a lot of conversation about lifetime income, because people are living longer. We really just had the first change in life expectancy where it went down slightly, but overall, over the last 30 years, life expectancy has gone up. So individuals are worried about making sure that the income that they've accumulated, the wealth that they've amassed, is going to last them during their lifetime. And back to what Chris had said earlier about making sure that you last with long-term care and all your needs are met and your goals are met with your kids. And you know, I would just say too, you know, make sure that you work with a team. You know, don't think that because you're working with one advisor that advisor should be your lawyer and your accountant. We strongly recommend that you use a separate accountant, a separate lawyer, a separate investment professional. And the reason being because they're all checks and balances against each other, against fraud and that sort of thing. But yeah, the annuities are real big right now because of the lifetime income conversation. And again, a lot of the commercials that you see, they're all driving that. Now, they all have their own little quirk about how they want to say it. And in some cases, I'll say misleading in some ways of how they want to say it. But they're all focused on the same thing, and that is making sure that income will last during their lifetime.
Very important. And does that affect their legal decisions as well? Trying to say that we don't want our children to take this money right away, you know, kind of putting it in trusts and so forth. That's probably on the mind of the baby boomers right now.
Well, and especially as the opioid crisis has affected Northeast Ohio, it's a conversation I'm unfortunately having a lot more, because one of the things, instead of passing, well, let me back up, 10 years ago, we probably would have had a conversation of just leaving money to adult children because they're adults and they're capable of handling it. Unfortunately now, more and more, we're having a conversation of placing that money in trust so that there's some so that we don't place the adult child in a position where there's more temptation than there needs to be, or we can derail an otherwise successful recovery.
Right.
Just so there's a little more check and balance there so that it can be more supervised.
Now, we talked a little bit earlier about this is the Rust Belt. We've got a lot of industry moving out. We have some small businesses changing what they do. Service industry, as Jim Snyder talked about. So Chris Wetherbee, what are some of the most important things for those that are not involved in industry anymore? Well, farmers, Northeast Ohio, Northern Ohio has quite a few farms, small businesses, and just generally the labor force out there. So what are some of the things when a family comes in and we have a millennial, a Gen Xer, millennial being the children of the baby boomers, what are some of the things you want to make sure before they leave the office that they get done? You know, top 5 things.
Just having a conversation. Often a family will come into the office and we'll talk through, okay, what's going to make sense, and that's sometimes the first time we're having that conversation. And that's something I'm absolutely happy to help facilitate. Right. Just so that we can make sure mom and dad may have one vision, son and daughter may have a different vision, and just making sure everybody's on the same page and moving in the same direction.
As Jim Snyder said, it's good to have a group sense or a group, you know, different inputs from different attorneys, different financial planners and accountants. So do you find that sometimes the children or the grandchildren moved out of town, they have a different attorney and they collaborate with, you know, a group? Do you often get meetings like that? We have to work with others?
Fairly frequently, especially with an attorney isn't a financial planner. You don't want me to manage your assets. I'm very bad at it.
Get a hold of
Jim Snyder or any financial planner. So it's fairly common that we'll have conversations with the financial planners of where are the assets, how can we assist in getting the paperwork put together to get those transferred into the trust that we've created, or changing beneficiary designations, which is something that's so simple that a lot of people miss. Making sure that those pass to the surviving spouse and then to the kids or the grandkids or wherever you want those to go, because that can happen in a matter of weeks instead of a matter of months, which would be the probate process.
An interesting stat along that same line that I just read, that 86% of millennials believe that they're ready to take care of mom and dad's inheritance, but only 42% of the baby boomers believe that they're ready.
Right.
So that's why that conversation needs to take place, to make sure they're all on the same page.
And I was going to ask if one of you were talking about health care issues. We're living in an area where there are many more assisted living, long-term care areas of concern. So from a financial point of view, how do you prepare for something like that, Jim?
Well, again, all of what we've been saying, having a conversation. You know, we always tell stories about past bad things, and we've got all kinds of bad stories like that, but where people, if they just would have had a conversation with you, you could have planned and gotten things ready, but instead, just a quick example, I had somebody once that passed away but left the money to their wife who was in a nursing home. And you just don't want that to occur.
Right.
If they just would have had a conversation with me or with any professional like Chris or anybody else, somebody would have said, hey, we need to get the beneficiary updated on that and leave it to the kids.
Right.
So instead, what happened was pretty much when they passed away, Medicaid took all that money and it's all gone because they had no choice. So it's just about having a conversation every day. And I try to have a conversation all the time and say the best financial planning tool, the best legal planning tool is a legal pad. Write down your wishes, write down your dreams, write down what you want to do. And for goodness sakes, when you go to talk to your financial person or your legal professional, have those thoughts written out. The worst thing that, you know, I'm sure Chris goes through, that we go through, is somebody will come talk to you and they literally have no idea. They haven't written it down at all and they haven't had a conversation.
We here in Northeast Ohio, a lot in the snow belt up here, we have a lot of snowbirds that travel to different states, to the south, the west, you know, southwest, Arizona, Florida, California, and they try to get away from our weather. So attorneys and financial planners sometimes have to talk to other state colleagues and try to get everybody on the same page, because you've got property, you've got investments in other states. So I can see the complication. It's so good to have an attorney involved as a baby boomer, and I know this gives me an inspiration to get involved with an attorney such as yourself. Again, we have Chris Wetherbee, our guest, who provided us with a little bit of legal decision-making, understanding as to what baby boomers need to do, and Jim Snyder, seniorfinancialgroup.com, Senior Financial Group founder, and he is also a radio talk show host in Canton, discussing many of these very same topics. You've been listening and watching Forum 360 on Fusion, Western Reserve PBS, and we appreciate our audience. And if you have any questions, we can refer you to medinalaw.com or seniorfinancialgroup.com. And no matter if you're a millennial, a Gen Xer, you've got probably have some baby boomers in your family or friends, please think about some of the topics we talked about here on Forum 360, and know hopefully it'll benefit your family. Thank you very much for being with us. I want to thank both of you for really, it was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Forum 360 is brought to you by Electrical Impulse Communications, the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, Hudson Community Television, the Rubber City Radio Group, an anonymous donor, the Jewish Community Board of Akron, Medical Mutual of Ohio, Blue Green, and Forum 360 supporters.